So I fully acknowledge that I'm kind of late to the party in filming this tag video. It's designed to be like a halfway through the year tag video, and now we're more than halfway through the year. But interestingly enough, I'm 26 and my voice is still cracking, so I think I'm just kind of late to the party when it comes to a lot of things. The first question of this book tag is, what is the best book that you've read so far this year? This was not a hard one for me to think about. I think very easily the answer is The Refrigerator Monologues by Catherine M. Valenti. This is a book by one of my favorite authors on one of my favorite subjects, so the chances of me not picking this book for this answer were pretty slim to begin with. If you don't know, Catherine M. Valenti is the author of The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland, and that is my favorite series of all time, so she's become quite near and dear to my heart. I don't enjoy everything that she does because she does have some pretty strange fiction out there that's just hard for me to enjoy and even in some parts understand. But this ended up being a relatively straightforward collection of essentially feminist superhero stories, and I just really enjoyed everything in this collection, and they're great stories. The next question is, what is the best sequel that you've read? And again, this is something that was not hard for me to answer. The answer is The Wall of Storms by Kevin Liu. This is the second book in a fantasy series that he's writing right now. I think it's called The Dandelion Dynasty. Basically, it is a Eastern-inspired fantasy series, whereas a lot of the fantasy series that we read or that come to our attention here in the US are Western-inspired. I'm enjoying it partly because of the novelty of just reading fantasies that are unlike other fantasies that I've read before, and also because they are just very, very entertaining books with fantastic writing, awesome characters, and really compelling plot lines. Have I sold you on the series yet? What else do I have to say about it? Because there's nothing else I can say. The next question is, what is a new release that you want to read but haven't yet? I picked 3 because I'm an overachiever, but I'm also an underachiever because I forgot to actually write down the authors' names. So that's what I'm looking up now. It's really difficult to be both the best and worst at something at the same time, but that's basically my brand, in case you haven't noticed. So the 3 books that I picked for this answer are all books that I own, and they are all books that I've been wanting to read because everyone's talking about them, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet. First book is Exit West by Mohsin Hamid, and this is a book that is magical realism. I think it's about refugees, it's about strange doors appearing all around the world. That's all I know about it, but it was enough to sell me on it. I really can't wait to read it. I just, for some reason, have not picked it up. Shame on me. Second part of this answer is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. Another book that I've really wanted to read. I read a chapter sampler for it about a year ago, so I know maybe like the first 2 chapters. And I do really want to read the rest of the book. I just haven't been reading a lot of YA fantasy lately. Don't know why. Just happens. I go through phases. And the last book is The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. It's another book that I own, another book that I fully intend to read because I've heard awesome things about it, and everyone's talking about the incredible representation of this book, and I do want to read it, but I haven't had the time yet. Question number 4 is, what is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year? I feel like all these questions so far have just been very simple to answer because I have strong opinions about a lot of things, and definitely when it comes to these questions, I've got strong opinions. But this answer is hands down Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. This is going to be the 3rd book, I think 3rd out of 5 in the Stormlight Archive series by Brandon Sanderson, which is widely regarded as his magnum opus. People think it's like the best thing ever, and it really is. And I was skeptical about it at first, but I did read the first book in the series, The Way of Kings, earlier this year, and I loved it. I thought it was kind of difficult to get into, but by the end of it, I was fully on board with everything that was happening. Next question is, what is the biggest disappointment that you've read so far this year? Like an earlier question in this video, I have multiple answers for this question because there have been some pretty big disappointments. Previously on my channel, I've talked about Final Girls by Riley Sager, which is a thriller that I just was not thrilled by. Not as clever as it sounded, I know. And then part 2 of this answer is Dear Cyborgs by Eugene Lim, which is kind of an existential superhero philosophy that was just not my cup of tea at all. And the only reason I would consider it a disappointment is because I was waiting for it, I had it on my wish list, and I waited until release day to pick this book up. So I was disappointed because I was hoping that it would be a cool book, and in my opinion, it wasn't. And then the last part of this answer is The Backstagers by James Tinian IV, which is a comic series about a group of guys who work as part of the stage crew at their local high school, and they are secretly the protectors of another dimension full of strange theater monsters. I don't know how to describe it. But the reason it was a disappointment is because I have been, again, waiting for the release of this book. I've known about the series for a while, but this is the first trade paperback, volume 1 of the series, so I was very eager to get to it, especially because I've heard that the representation of LGBT community in this book is supposed to be really amazing. I wasn't really blown away by the representation. In fact, it seemed like there wasn't a ton of it to be had. There's definitely the inkling of some romance between several characters. There's the suggestion of a relationship, and it's kind of hinted that 2 of the characters are together, but again, it's not really shown on the page. And I've just become a little more vocal about having specific representation and overt representation as opposed to the suggestion of relationships, of LGBTQ relationships, because I just think the time for that is past, don't you? The next question is, what has been the biggest surprise so far of this year? The answer, again, has multiple parts. I don't know if I should be picking multiple books for all of these questions because we're never going to get through it. But honestly, there have been some really good books that I was not expecting to like so far this year. The first book is Emma by Jane Austen, which is obviously a classic, and I've been trying to read at least one classic a month. Haven't really been hitting that pace, but I've been wanting to read Jane Austen for a while, especially because my boss loves Jane Austen and I'm trying to earn brownie points with her. But I actually loved it. I thought it was great. It's also more enjoyable once you learn that it is the basis of Clueless, because it's very easy to see where the inspiration for that movie was drawn from in this book, and a lot of the characters are kind of ripped straight from the book and brought into the movie. But besides that, obviously the book has a ton of merit on its own. It's a very entertaining book. It's funny in its own way, and I did not expect actually to think it was funny, because a lot of times books are touted as funny and they kind of fall flat for me. This book, I don't know if people call it funny on a daily basis, but for me, there's plenty of humor in it, and I really enjoyed reading it. The second part of this answer, the biggest surprise so far this year, is Snot Girl by Brian Lee O'Malley, which is an Image comic series about, basically she's a fashion blogger. The main character is a fashion blogger, and she becomes infatuated, or at least jealous, of this other rival fashion blogger who she thinks is perfect, and she really wants to be best friends with her because she's obsessed with her image, and she thinks this character will either help her out or end up being a really good influence on her social media presence. And then several issues into the series, something catastrophic happens and the main character's life takes a very strange turn, and there's a mystery involved, and it's kind of just weird and bizarre. I loved the art in this series, and I also love the characters in the series because it's poking fun at millennial culture, at online culture, but it's also saying a lot of valid things about it, and it's also just kind of having fun with the subject matter. It's not saying that you shouldn't do these things, that you shouldn't blog, that you shouldn't use social media, but it's kind of just saying, like, isn't that funny how we do that? The next question is, who is your favorite new author this year? And I would say definitely Robin Hobb, because I've been looking for a new favorite fantasy author for a while now, ever since China Me Able kind of went downhill for me. She might become his replacement. I'm not saying that she writes similar books as him, because they are very different books. I think they're more traditional fantasies, whereas China writes a lot of strange, weird fantasies. So she's a bit more traditional in that regard, but I think she does the genre justice because she just writes really great books, and I'm only saying this based on one book that I've read by her. But I do plan on reading a lot of the other books that she's written just as soon as I can, because I think they're all going to be great, at least from what I've heard. The next question is books that have made you cry. I'm just going to list these because you don't need to know why I've cried or what made me cry about them. There's also a lot on this list. First, we have Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides. Then we have Hyde by Matthew Green. There's also The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. Grace of Kings / Wall of Storms by Ken Liu, The Refrigerator Monologues by Catherine M. Valenti, and A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet / A Closed and Common Orbit, both by Becky Chambers. I'm not saying this is the year of me crying over books, but I'm also not saying that. The next question is, what is your favorite video that you've filmed so far this year? This is a two-way tie between my DIY Painted Pages video and my first gay book video that I did a few weeks ago. They were both really fun to make. They are both unlike other videos I've done for my channel before, and they both were difficult to make either because of time restraints or things that I was a little uncomfortable talking about or filming because I hadn't done them before. They've both been very well received by you guys, and I'm really thankful for that because they were, like I said, kind of hard for me to make for various reasons. So I do plan on making more videos like that in the future. I try to do like one challenging video, one artsy video out of every 3 or 4 videos that I do. So more of that coming, probably not coming immediately in the future, but just be a little patient. And there'll be more stuff like that. The last question is, what is a book you need to read by the end of the year? For this, I'm going to say Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson, which is part of a series I've already mentioned in this video, but it's the second book in the series, and the third book is coming out later this fall, so obviously I gotta read the second book first. That's really the only book that I'm going to say that I have to read this year. I like to generally just read whatever I want, given the time, which is why I have so many unread books on my bookshelves, and why I'm constantly buying more books, because I can't help but feel the way I feel in the moment. And if I don't want to read a book, even if I've wanted to read it for months or even years, if I look at it and I don't feel enough emotions about it, then I'm not going to pick it up. And that's just the way that I am. I think a lot of people are that way too. So those are all the questions that are part of this tag. Let me know in the comment section below what a few of your answers would be for the questions that I've answered in today's video. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this video. It really means a lot to me, and I will see you all again very soon. Bye.